Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. At the end of September, the US issued so-called penetrative export control rules, automatically adding majority-owned subsidiaries of companies already on the US entity list to the blacklist. China's Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Foreign Affairs have already issued multiple statements refuting this. Foreign media believe that China's tightening of export controls on rare earths is a countermeasure against this US policy. In addition to China's rebuttal, even American companies couldn't help but step up and push back. According to a Reuters report on October 21, a business lobbying group whose board includes leading U.S. companies like Oracle, Amazon, and ExxonMobil, urged the Trump administration to immediately suspend this new trade regulation. This group warned that the new regulation would actually cause billions of dollars worth of U.S. exports to come to a standstill, and would prompt China and other countries to remove American companies from their supply chains. The White House and the U.S. Department of Commerce have not yet responded. According to the contents of a letter obtained by Reuters, and a letter sent to U.S. President Trump on October 3 under the name of the National Foreign Trade Council, NFTC, the chairman of the council, Coleman, directly targeted the look-through rule. He bluntly stated that this rule has already caused billions of dollars worth of U.S. exports to be immediately suspended. This runs completely counter to your, that is, Trump's, stated goals of reducing the trade deficit and boosting U.S. global exports. He further warned that if this rule remains unchanged, it will push other countries to turn to non-US made goods, ultimately harming US national security. Because countries around the world, led by the US, will remove US nodes from their supply chains. The letter also accused the US Department of Commerce of significantly slowing down, or even temporarily halting, the approval process for export license applications, especially those involving Chinese clients. According to the NFTC, there are now thousands of license applications worth billions of US dollars backlogged at the Department of Commerce. The NFTC declined to comment on the contents of the letter. Reuters pointed out that for a long time, US-China hawks have been seeking to further crack down on sanctioned Chinese companies through so-called penetrative rules. But this letter has exposed the opposition and dissatisfaction of the US private sector toward this highly controversial rule. On September 29, the U.S. Department of Commerce issued the Export Control Penetrative Rule, imposing the same level of export control sanctions on subsidiaries in which companies already on the U.S. entity list hold more than 50% ownership. Not long after, on October 8, the U.S. side announced that several more Chinese entities would be added to the Export Control Entity List. According to a report by Bloomberg, the latest rules announced by the U.S. Department of Commerce can be said to be long in the making, with the intention of preventing sanctioned companies, especially Chinese companies, from obtaining restricted U.S. goods through their subsidiaries. Bloomberg quoted some industry insiders as saying that they are concerned the purpose of this regulatory change is to address what some U.S. policymakers call a whack-a-mole problem in export control enforcement, but this could create trouble for companies, making it harder for them to determine whether potential clients are already subject to additional restrictions. The Financial Times also interpreted that although the new U.S. regulations do not specifically name China, several Chinese companies are among the targets. The report emphasized that this new regulation is one of the first actions taken after the Trump administration returned to power, aimed at addressing concerns over China acquiring U.S. technology that could potentially aid the modernization of the PLA. The Financial Times cited preliminary analysis data from research institute Wirescreen, stating that the new regulation will affect thousands of subsidiaries of Chinese state-owned groups and other companies. It is worth mentioning that foreign media have all noted that on October 9, China's Ministry of Commerce announced that China will implement export controls on certain overseas rare earth-related items and technologies that contain Chinese components. Foreign media generally interpret this move by China as a blow to the U.S. automotive supply chain, forcing the Trump administration back to the negotiating table. To sum up a few observations, first, the U.S.'s penetrative export controls have affected normal trade between Chinese and American companies. While Chinese businesses have certainly suffered losses, American companies have been hit even harder. They not only lose access to Chinese components, but their products also can't be sold to China. Second, just like with American soybeans, once U.S. companies cut off supplies to China for various non-market reasons, it leads China to exclude American firms from its supply chain to avoid the risk of unstable supply caused by policy changes. Third, for China, Trump's extreme trade bans only serve to accelerate the process of domestic substitution within Chinese supply chains. The result is that the U.S. ends up shooting itself in the foot. In addition, the Trump administration has been putting pressure on Latin American countries, trying to limit their trade and other cooperation with China. However, even Trump's closest ally, Argentine President Milei, was quick to deny any intention to decouple from China. According to a Wall Street Journal report on December 21, the Trump administration, on one hand, is moving forward with providing $40 billion in aid to Argentina, whose economy is in crisis. On the other hand, they are pressuring Argentine officials to limit China's growing influence in this South American country. According to sources familiar with the matter, in recent weeks, U.S. Treasury Secretary has held talks with Argentina's Economy Minister Caputo to discuss the financial aid plan. The core topics during these discussions included restricting China's access to Argentine resources, including critical minerals, as well as allowing the U.S. to expand its access to Argentina's uranium supply. The U.S. is also trying to encourage Argentina to cooperate with American companies to invest in key sectors such as infrastructure and telecommunications, in order to counter what they call Beijing's influence. U.S. Treasury officials have already told senior Argentine officials that they want to see American companies become the main suppliers in Argentina's telecommunications and internet industries, rather than companies linked to China. According to U.S. media reports, China currently holds a significant position in Argentina's telecommunications and internet markets. Argentina's domestic telecom giant, Telecom Argentina, recently reached a $74 million loan agreement with the Bank of China. Huawei, which is under U.S. sanctions, is also operating 5G mobile network services in Argentina. In addition, China is providing funding for the construction of a nuclear power plant in Argentina, which will be operated using Chinese technology. At the same time, given the continuously growing demand for electricity, China is seeking to expand its supply of uranium resources. At present, China already holds significant investments in several mining projects in Argentina. Reports indicate that with the current escalation of China-U.S. trade tensions, if China is pushed out of the Argentine market, the United States will gain a significant advantage. However, analysts point out that according to Argentina's constitution, each province owns the rights to its mineral, oil, and natural gas resources. This means that unless the support of the provincial governors is secured, the Milei administration cannot make any substantial commitments to the Trump administration. In a recent television interview, Milei denied that his government would cut ties with China, and he also claimed that the Trump administration had not asked him to do so. When asked whether Argentina would sever ties with China, Milei hurriedly denied it, repeating 3 times, "No, that's not true." According to a report by the Los Celis Herald, although the Argentine side has denied it, it is clear that the U.S. government's economic aid comes with conditions, requiring China to withdraw from the Argentine market. However, the report points out that Argentina exports several billion U.S. dollars worth of goods to China every year, and there are also multiple large-scale infrastructure projects currently being planned. Whether the Milei administration can bear the cost of cutting ties with China is a big question mark. Just, the executive chairman of the Argentina-China Strategic Cooperation Observatory, bluntly stated that it is hard to imagine how breaking up with China could actually be carried out in practice. China is a major source of investment for Argentina in several sectors, including energy, railways, lithium, and mining. For Argentina to give up cooperation in any of these areas now would be absurd. Consini, the executive chairman of the Argentine Chamber of Chinese Production, Industry and Commerce, believes that China is a key supplier of essential goods to Argentina, covering agricultural and construction machinery, industrial equipment such as motors and power transformers, solar panels, trucks, and even train components. He believes that Argentina cannot do without China. Without imports from China, Argentina's domestic industry simply would not be able to function. He believes that even if the Milei administration takes measures to reduce economic and trade relations with China, it will not be able to terminate existing investments, but it may slow down the pace of investment or cause new agreements and new investments to be put on hold. Just added that China would not actively breach contracts, but if it were attacked, it would definitely take countermeasures. Both of them mentioned that when it comes to cooperation with China, the Argentine federal government cannot make decisions on its own. For example, rare earths and other natural resources are owned by the provinces, not under the jurisdiction of the federal government. Conconi emphasized that provincial governors are very likely to protect Chinese-funded projects and investments within their regions. Governors from all parties visit China and are eager to pursue cooperation. In conclusion, although the Milei administration needs support from the United States, it is also well aware of China's importance to Argentina in terms of trade. If Argentina were to break ties with China, its economy would suffer a catastrophic blow. To sum up, in the power struggle between China and the US, it's truly difficult for a third country to take charge, and it really tests the political wisdom of its leaders.